When I got into college, I set out to be a model student. I turned up promptly every day, neat in my best twin sets and tweed skirts, with my pencils sharpened, ready to be the hardest working girl in the place. My dream was to be an art teacher. Art was the only subject I'd ever liked at school, and I was thrilled when at the age of 12 I got into the junior art school, which was down the street from the art college. It was there that I became best friends with a girl called Phyllis Mackenzie. We planned to go on to college together, but Phil's father refused to let her go and insisted she get a job. She had to settle for evening classes in life drawing after spending the day working as a commercial artist for a local corn merchant. Most of us starting college then had been born just before or during the war. In my case, a week after war was declared. My parents both came from Liverpool, but at the outbreak of war they decided to leave the city for the relative safety of the Wirral across the Mersey in Cheshire. They moved with me and my brothers, Charles, then 11, and Tony, 8, to a 2-bedroom, semi-detached house in a small seaside village called Hoylake. My father worked for the GEC, selling electrical appliances to shops, and had to travel into the city each day to make his rounds. But at home we were away from the worst of the relentless bombing that ravaged so much of Liverpool. When the bombers flew overhead, my mother would scoop us into the cupboard under the stairs, where the force of the explosions jolted us off our seats. I grew up with rationing as a way of life. Like all the other families around us, we dug for Britain, with an allotment where we grew our vegetables, and a little hen coop in the back garden. As in so many households in those days, the boys generally took precedence over the girls. When my brothers got bacon, I got the rind, and when they got scraps of meat from a bone, I got the bone to chew. It was my job to clean their shoes and help my mother look after them and Dad. I was a quiet, timid child, and I accepted my role in the house as the youngest and the only girl without question. My parents were opposites in many ways, but they loved each other, and I never heard them argue. My father, also Charles, was easygoing, kind, robust, and jolly. I remember him losing his temper with me only once, when I came home from school and used a swear word. I adored him, and after I got into the junior art school, I travelled into Liverpool on the train with him, in the mornings and evenings. He used to carry a bag of sweets for his customers, and he'd slip me a couple on the way home. My mother, Lillian, was unusual for her day. She had no interest in housework and cleaned our home about once a month. The rest of the time it gathered dust. But Mum had a strong artistic streak. She always had a vase of flowers in the window, which she took pleasure in arranging. She knitted fantastic Fair Isle sweaters. Her real passion, though, was the auction rooms, to which she would head every Monday to spot the latest bargains. On Monday evenings, Dad and I would arrive home to find the front room changed. There might be a new sofa, carpet, curtains, table, or even all of them, the old ones already dispatched to the same sale rooms. We didn't mind, and it was always fun to see what she'd done, and most important, it made Mum happy. When Dad became ill at the age of 56, everything changed. Like so many others in those days, he smoked untipped cigarettes, unaware of the damage it was doing to him. When he developed lung cancer, he went downhill rapidly. His solid frame wasted away and his breathing was laboured. Before long, all he could do was sit in his chair in the bedroom, where I would sit with him after school each day. After his death, only Mum and I were left, grieving for him and wondering how we would manage. Art college gave me a new focus, something to be excited about, to work for, and to take me out of our quiet little house of mourning into the world. Watching the older, more confident kids at college, I longed to be like them. I envied their casual arty style and their long hair. I had arrived with my short mousy hair in a neat perm, courtesy of my mother's friend who was a hairdresser. Every few weeks she would experiment, giving me a different style, but they were all ghastly, and to make things worse I wore glasses. I'd arrived at college thrilled to be rid of school uniform and pleased with my smart new clothes. But I soon felt frumpy and dull, with my matronly hair and conventional outfits. I longed to be more daring, but in those early days I didn't have the courage. To add to my problems, I was saddled with the over-the-water, posh image that Scousers had of anyone who lived across the Mersey. I spoke differently, and to them this meant I was stuck up, even though many of them were better off than I was. My shyness didn't help. It made me seem aloof, when most of the time I was going through agonies trying to think of the right thing to say. 2/3 of the way through my foundation year, Phil arrived at college. She had won a grant and had finally persuaded her father to let her attend full-time. We were both delighted, and in between classes we hung around together most of the time. At the end of that year we had to choose which areas we wanted to specialise in. I went for graphics, but I also signed up for a twice-weekly class in lettering. Phil decided on painting and lettering, and we were glad of the chance to do a class together. I arrived for my second year in college just as keen as I had been in the first, but I'd softened my appearance a little. I plucked up the courage to say no to Mum's hairdresser friend and was growing my hair. I'd acquired some rather hip black velvet pants to replace the tweed skirts, and I'd begun to ditch my glasses as often as I could. We had all taken our seats for the first lettering class when a teddy boy slouched into the room, hands stuffed deep into his coat pockets, looking bored and a shade defiant. He sat at an empty desk behind me, tapped me on the back, twisted his face into a ludicrous grimace, and said, "Hi, I'm John." I couldn't help smiling. "Cynthia," I whispered, as the teacher, who had begun to talk, frowned at me. I'd seen John around the college, but had never spoken to him, as we moved in completely different circles. I was surprised to see him in the lettering class. He didn't seem the type for the painstaking, detailed work involved. He hadn't even brought any equipment. As soon as we started work, he tapped my back again and asked to borrow a pencil and a brush, which I reluctantly handed over. After that, he always sat behind me, borrowing whatever he needed from me. Not that he used it much. Most of the time he did no work at all. He spent his time fooling around, making everyone in the class laugh. When I first looked at John, I thought, yuck, not my type. With his teddy boy look, DA haircut, narrow drainpipe trousers, and a battered old coat that was far too big for him. He was very different from the clean-cut boys I was used to. His outspoken comments and caustic wit were alarming. I was terrified he might turn on me, and he soon did, calling me Miss Prim or Miss Powell, and taking the mickey out of my smart clothes and posh accent. The first time he did it, I rushed out of the room, red-faced, at the end of the class, wishing he'd disappear. But as the weeks went by, I began to look forward to seeing him. A mutual friend told me that his mother had been killed in a car accident at the end of the previous term. I miss my father desperately, so I felt for him. He never mentioned it, and neither did anyone else. But the knowledge that he was hiding grief behind the acerbic front made me look at him more closely. One morning, the students in the lettering class were testing each other's eyesight for fun. It turned out that John and I were equally short-sighted. Just like me, he couldn't see a thing and hated wearing glasses, most of all, ironically, the little round lenses you got on the National Health. Instead, he had horn-rimmed black ones, which had cost quite a bit. Laughing about our rotten luck and the blunders we'd made when we couldn't see gave us our real first connection, and after that we often chatted during class. John usually had a guitar slung round his back when he arrived, and he told me he was in a group, the Quarrymen, named after his old school, Quarrybank High. Sometimes when we were sitting around after class, he would get it out and strum the pop tunes of the day by Bo Diddley, Chuck Berry or Lonnie Donegan, and as soon as he began to play, I saw a different side of him. It was plain that he loved his music. His face softened, and he lost his usually cynical expression. Halfway through the term, I realized I was falling for him, and scolded myself. I was being ridiculous. He wasn't at all the type of boy I'd imagined myself with, and in any case, I couldn't see him being interested in me. But that changed one day when everyone else had left the class and I was packing up my things. John was sitting a few feet away with his guitar. He began to play Ain't She Sweet, a song that was popular at the time and which the Beatles were later to record. I blushed scarlet, made an excuse, and fled before the end of the song, but I'd seen the look in his eyes, which he'd kept fixed on me as he sang. Could it be that John fancied me too? One lunchtime I saw John staring at a girl as she walked up the staircase. She was dressed in a tight black skirt and had long blonde hair. John whistled. "She looks just like Bridget Bardot," I heard him say to a friend. I wasn't about to be outdone. The following Saturday I went out, got the latest Hiltone blonde dye, and got to work on my hair. On Monday I arrived in college, by several shades blonder. I was delighted when John noticed. "Get you, Miss Hoylake," he laughed, but I could see he liked it.